Father-in-law feels owed time with grandchildren. My father-in-law lives in our town, and for the past few years, since my husband and I moved here and had children, we've seen him regularly, at least weekly, and allowed him to be a part of many family events, Christmas morning, trick-or-treating, etc. The problem is, I can't stand him, and I think recently the fact that he's a perpetual part of my life is getting to me. My husband and I talk about this at length and really don't know how to handle it, as he is constantly applying pressure to see us, and when he doesn't hear from us even for a few days makes us stink. I'd love to know what those who have local grandparents and parents have in terms of expectations for time spent. Off the bat, important to share that undoubtedly my father-in-law, who is 78-year-old, is a textbook narcissist, undiagnosed, as the worst ones are. He was a terrible husband, verbally, emotionally, and perhaps physically abused my mother-in-law and brother-in-law, who is 10 years older than my husband. He really fucked up my brother-in-law, who at 44 is also a huge narcissist with depression and other mental health challenges, and he cheated on my mother-in-law when my husband was 8. Because they divorced after that, my husband miraculously ended up really unscathed and had a great childhood and fine relations with his dad, likely due to his mother shielding him and playing the role of primary caregiver. In fact, father-in-law somehow managed to remain a part of everyone's lives, having some custody of my husband. Brother-in-law was an adult by the time of the split, combining holidays with my mother-in-law and her new husband, and just generally being around. When I first met my husband, father-in-law was in a new relationship with a woman who was wonderful. This was after 3 failed marriages, my mother-in-law being his third, and a long-term partnership, nearly 18 years. When you first meet him, he seems like a character more than anything, very grandiose, clearly thinks he's charming and full of anecdotes. Anyone who gets to know him, however, finds that the anecdotes are the same, and tired, and he can actually be quite rude, domineering of conversations, selfish, and stingy. His girlfriend broke up with him after 8 years, which at first seemed like a shock to us, but quickly was not all that surprising, given how much better she was than him. She explained the breakup to him well, that for all his good qualities, she simply couldn't handle his bad ones anymore, in particular how he acts in public. See, rudeness, stinginess, extra pompous behavior. The breakup devastated him, and while he initially seemed to reflect on the feedback she gave, it quickly became her fault for the split, and he, being entirely alone in his life, became increasingly needy and more present in our lives than I had ever known him to be. We had just had our first child and thick in the throes of newborn life, weren't able to offer him as much company as my brother-in-law was able to, although I will note, he still was seeing us for an hour or so weekly. He became increasingly codependent with my brother-in-law, spending many evenings at his house late into the night, attending parties my brother-in-law hosted, and even vacationing with my brother-in-law and family. Now brother-in-law also can get irritated at his dad, and their relationship is a constant roller coaster of fighting or being attached at the hip. I'm sure there were complex psychological reasons for why my brother-in-law was so supportive of him, but husband and I later realized that his motivation was at least partially financial. We realized this when we found out that our father-in-law bought a vacation home in an area brother-in-law loves and put brother-in-law's name on the deed. Now that situation could be an entirely different post, but very quickly, a fight ensued. Brother-in-law cut off all contact with father-in-law. They sold the house, and 2 years later still have not spoken. This fallout then left father-in-law with no one, except for us. We tried to keep the same cadence of visits with him that we always had, weekly or so, dinners or quick visits with our children. However, driven largely by the fact that he really is alone, the requests to see us have done nothing but increase. Our ability to tolerate him waxes and wanes over time. So over the course of the last years we have had times that we've been more amenable to seeing him than not. Important to note my use of the word tolerate, because at best, when we spend time with him it's fine, at worst, it's painstaking. It's also important for me to share the ways he is guilting us to see him. First is the explicit shameless guilt, haven't heard from you in a while, or I'm not getting any younger, or I won't be around forever so I need to spend time with my granddaughters. He is not shy to tell us what we should be doing in terms of involving him. Second, is trying to buy us and make us feel indebted through thinly veiled offers to help. This is where I struggle the most. Years ago, he gifted us a large sum of money, which we've kept in savings, that he explained was to make us even with my brother-in-law, who he had lent the same amount of money to work hard and never received repayment or mentions repayment for. Father-in-law said that in doing so, he wouldn't have any worries of equity at the time of his death when his will was being executed. I wasn't super comfortable taking the money, but knowing it was to equalize with the brother-in-law helped. Additionally, my father-in-law has given us some significant gifts. He's paid to install a safety fence around our pool. I justified this as something for my daughters, and gave us a new washer-dryer as a Christmas gift. I didn't really want either of these gifts to happen because I felt they wouldn't be guilt-free and because we were able to pay for them ourselves, but father-in-law practically begged as he wanted to contribute as we had just moved into a new house. Additionally, my own parents had contributed similarly to our home as well again, another way I justified, since his offers to pay for things for us have not ceased. But my husband and I have agreed we will not accept anything from him again to avoid feeling associated guilt. It's obvious that his offers are a way to have control. In fact, following his fallout with brother-in-law, he quickly removed brother-in-law from his will, instead bequeathing his share to a local animal shelter. He did this, as he explained to us, because he knew if he left it all to my husband, we would feel compelled to share it with my brother-in-law. Third and finally, he guilt-trips us by constantly comparing what he gets to what my parents get in terms of time with us and my daughters. My parents are also local, much younger, 60, still working, have a house with nursery and kids' toys and treats, and are equipped to care for our children. We see them every week or 2 weeks, but in general have more meaningful time with them too. We vacation with them, and they are the backup caretakers for our daughters, keeping them for nights or weekends when we are away, or being backup care on snow days or sick days. He is constantly whining about not having time, as compared to them. And while we could explain all of the reasons that logistically my parents get more time with us and the girls, ultimately, we prefer them because they are normal, loving, and supportive no-strings-attached parents who on top of it all are people we enjoy being around. And of course I'm biased to my own family, but my husband fully agrees. So, all of this huge context aside, I am really struggling on how to handle him. We've been living in a cycle of excuses on putting off seeing him, and then seeing him when we have to throw him a bone, only to be guilt about it not being enough. Despite his terrible past, he's never explicitly done anything wrong to us, nor is there any tangible evidence I can point to explaining why I don't want him around. He obviously doesn't take feedback either, so a rationale discussion about his behavior is off the table, and he is not a normal person who reads the room, so won't get a clue and back off. I'm just wondering, how much is he owed to see us, given all of this? He is a grandfather after all, and my daughters do have fun with him, but they have fun with everyone. And if the answer is nothing or not much, how do we manage making that happen?